In this lesson, we'll do a more in-depth look at setting up camera rigs for animation in Max. If you're shooting footage for a live action shot, chances are your camera rigs are going to be quite complex. But when it comes to animating the camera in 3D, take Max for example, we really don't need too much to create some incredible camera animations. For example, let's say if we wanted to create a tripod camera rig. Well, what we could always do is use a helper that's at the base where the floor would be, offset the camera, and then go ahead and link that camera to the helper. And here's what we get. If we were to go ahead and select this helper and press Alt-A to view the shot camera, as we start to move this helper around, you could see, again, we have this tripod type of effect, so we can animate, let's say, the camera being knocked down, and that's what we'll work on in this scene. So let's see how quickly we can animate something like that with this camera in Max with this basic setup. So what I'll go ahead and do is turn on auto key, and while keeping both views open here so we can just get an idea of what's happening in the shot, I'll go to about a point where the character is about to knock the camera over. That's on frame 18. We can head over to our key filters, make sure just rotation is checked on, and I'll go ahead and set a rotation key. Now, being that we are rotating this object, what I like to do is head over to the motion panel, and under rotation, I like to make sure that the axis order is one where we can avoid gimbal lock as much as possible. That's when two axes align one on top of another. To see this, what you'd want to do is make sure your coordinate system is set to gimbal when in rotation mode. And then from there, you can go ahead and rotate different constraint rings, and that'll give you an idea of how the rotation will behave on that object. So instead of XYZ, the default, I like to switch this to something like ZXY to help avoid, again, gimbal. Alright, so with that now done, as the camera jumps, or as the character jumps, knocking over the camera, we can have that knockdown happen where it hits the floor, just looking at the timing here, about frame 26. So in 26, we'll go ahead and have this camera's pivot rotate down to hit the floor, and then we can also have it rotate over in the X, just so we can get the building in shot for something more interesting. Alright, so here's what we end up with if we were to focus on our shot camera and hit play. Okay, nice fall down. But of course, it doesn't look too realistic because we need to add some bouncing to this. So let's say we go to about frame 31, and in the y-axis we'll have this camera rotate up at its base. Not too much at all. We want to consider the weight of this camera. And then on 33 we could have it fall again on the floor. We could just clone the key from 26 to 33. So I'll hold down shift and drag the key on 26 with the left mouse button over to 33, so we have that same pose. So here's what we get now if we were to focus in on our shot camera. Just pressing Alt-W. If we were to hit play, alright, now we get this nice little camera animation, a feeling of this camera knocking over a tripod. The character knocking over a tripod. Keep getting those confused. Okay, so now that that's done, let's say we go ahead and animate some extra offsets on the camera itself. So again, with a setup like this, we can have even more control over how we animate the camera itself. As we animate the tripod object, we still have the control over animating the camera itself however we want. Alright, so let's say we go ahead and add some extra offsets with this camera, which will really make this sequence live. So on frame 18, again, just as the character is about to knock over the camera, we can go ahead and set a key. And then we can add some follow through as the camera is falling down. On about 21, let's go ahead and rotate the camera up, kind of over in the X. So here's what we get. Boom. It's falling, it's falling. And let's say on frame 26 we add some more follow through, just rotating it up just a little bit more. And now we could have a bounce happen as it hits the floor. It's going to rotate down now as the tripod object is rotating up. So on 31 we could go ahead and rotate it down just a little bit. And then as the camera hits the floor again, at about 33, we can go ahead and have it bounce up. We'll just rotate it up and over, just so we're not animating on just one axis. And then a few frames after that, 35, we can have it rotate down. And then up again, and then down just to add a slight bounce. Okay, let's see what this gives us. Focusing back in on our shot camera, can go ahead and hit play. All right, and look what we've created. A nice feeling of a tripod, or a camera constrained to a tripod being knocked down. And again, the setup that created this was not complex at all. All it took was a helper and the camera linked or parented to that helper, and then a little bit of keyframes, and we have something that, again, really makes this shot live. So I challenge you to go in and create different type of camera animations, studying live action footage, and see what type of setup you can use to make that happen in 3D. And see how simple you can make the setup. That's something else important we want to keep in mind. We want to make sure that the setups that we use are as simple as possible so we don't break anything in the end, causing us to redo work. But that's a quick look at setting up camera rigs. We're actually going to use camera rigs similar to this for a majority of our training course because it works so well. But with that said, again, we have done a quick discussion on setting up a good system for a camera rig.